The radio crackled once, twice, then came the voice, tight, urgent, edged with disbelief. Abort, abort, he's too fast. It wasn't shouted, it didn't need to be. In the cold air over Germany, where men had seconds to live or die, those words carried a weight that pressed down harder than gravity itself. The rookie heard none of it at first. He was too busy flying. The sky that morning was clean and pale, the kind of blue that felt almost polite, as if the war had agreed to behave for a few hours. Sunlight slid across the polished aluminum of his P-51 Mustang, turning the wings into mirrors. He had been in combat only a handful of times, not long enough to feel like the aircraft was an extension of his body, not long enough to stop thinking about checklists and procedures. His hands still moved carefully, deliberately, as if afraid of making the wrong decision too quickly. Below him, Europe rolled past in quiet fields and thin rivers, the land looking peaceful in a way that felt almost insulting. Then the warning came, a flicker at the edge of his vision, a glint where no glint should be. His eyes snapped left, then right, and the calm sky fractured into motion. Dark shapes, angular and sharp, cutting across the sun. Focke, Wolf 190s. Not one, not two, 9 of them, fanned out with practiced spacing, climbing toward him like predators that already knew how the hunt would end. His mouth went dry. 9 was not a mistake. 9 was not a stray patrol. 9 meant intent. 9 meant someone had seen him, measured him, and decided he was worth the fuel. He was alone. The Mustang vibrated faintly as he pushed the throttle forward, the Merlin engine answering with a deep, rising roar. The sound filled the cockpit, a living thing, smooth and powerful, like it had been waiting for this exact moment. The rookie didn't think in terms of tactics or doctrine. He thought in terms of distance, altitude, speed. He thought about the simple truth drilled into him during training, that the P-51's greatest weapon wasn't its guns, but the way it could turn fuel into motion better than almost anything in the sky. The German fighters closed fast. FW-190s were brutal machines, compact and muscular, with radial engines that looked like clenched fists. They were excellent at climbing, excellent at rolling, excellent at killing. Their pilots had thousands of hours between them, veterans of the Eastern Front, men who had learned to survive by being faster, smarter, and more ruthless than the ones who didn't come home. They expected the American to turn. He didn't. Instead, he shoved the nose down. The horizon tilted, then dropped away entirely. The Mustang tipped forward and began to dive, not steep enough to look desperate, not shallow enough to be cautious. The airspeed needle swept upward. The cockpit grew louder, the wind pressing harder against the canopy, the controls growing heavier under his hands. Behind him, the Germans reacted instantly. This was familiar ground. They followed, spreading slightly to avoid collision, confident in numbers and experience. The rookie could almost imagine their faces, calm, focused, already planning how to carve him apart once he bled off speed. But the Mustang kept accelerating. The ground rushed closer, fields sharpening into patterns, rivers thickening into solid lines. The airframe sang, a high, thin note threading through the engine's roar. The rookie's breathing slowed instead of quickening. There was something hypnotic about the way the aircraft felt at speed, stable and sure, as if it had finally stopped tolerating him and started trusting him. The first burst of cannon fire streaked past his left wing, black puffs blooming in his peripheral vision. He flinched, then forced himself not to. The Mustang shuddered slightly as he corrected, keeping the dive clean. No violent movements, no wasted motion. Altitude turned into velocity. The German formation stretched, not much, just enough. Inside one FW-190, a pilot glanced at his gauges, then forward, then back again. The American wasn't slowing. That was odd. At this height, at this angle, most pilots would already be fighting compressibility, wrestling with stiffening controls, but the Mustang kept pulling away, inch by inch, like a door quietly closing. More fire flashed past, farther this time. The rookie felt it then. A shift, subtle but unmistakable. The sensation that the airplane wanted to run, that it had more to give. He pushed just a little harder, trusting the machine in a way he hadn't trusted anything else in his life. The FW-190s were still faster in a dive at first, their heavy frames gaining speed quickly, but the Mustang's laminar flow wing began to assert itself. The air wrapped differently around its shape, cleaner, smoother. The gap stopped shrinking, then it started growing. The German radio came alive with clipped voices, calculations spoken aloud, distances called out, speeds compared, no panic yet, but confusion had crept in, thin and sharp. "He's not bleeding speed. Check your throttle. I am at full power." The rookie glanced at his fuel gauge without really seeing it. He didn't look back. Looking back was a mistake. He focused on the thin white line of a road cutting across the countryside, on the way shadows slid across fields as clouds drifted overhead. He focused on keeping the Mustang exactly where it wanted to be. The airspeed needle climbed higher. At this speed the world narrowed. The vibration smoothed out, replaced by a dense, humming pressure that pressed him into the seat. The controls were heavy now, but predictable. Alive, he made tiny corrections, more thought than movement. Another burst of fire, this one wide, hurried. The Germans were losing the geometry of the fight. At lower altitude, the Mustang leveled slightly, just enough to convert the last of the dive into raw, horizontal speed. The engine howled, a sound so pure and fierce it felt like a declaration. The fields below blurred. The FW-190s followed, but the space between them stretched into something undeniable. Inside the German formation, doubt turned solid. This was wrong. This was not how it went. One pilot tried to push harder, riding his engine past its comfort, watching temperatures creep upward. Another eased off, unwilling to risk mechanical failure so far from home. The formation frayed, cohesion unraveling not because of fear, but because physics was quietly taking sides. The radio call came again, sharper now, threaded with frustration. "He's pulling away." Seconds passed. Long seconds, the American grew smaller, a silver shape slipping forward into the haze, still perfectly level, still impossibly fast. The leader hesitated. Fuel, distance, risk, all the calculations that mattered when bravado stopped being useful. Then the words that would be repeated later, in mess halls and debriefings, with a shake of the head and a humorless smile. "Abort, abort, he's too fast." One by one, the FW-190s peeled away, climbing back toward altitude, their engines throttling down as the chase ended not with a kill, but with an admission. The rookie didn't know they had turned back. Not immediately. He kept flying, heart steady, hands calm, trusting the empty space ahead of him. Only after minutes had passed did he risk a glance behind. The sky was empty. No black shapes, no glinting wings. Just blue stretching endlessly in every direction. He exhaled, a long, quiet breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The Mustang surged on, engine strong, wings steady, carrying him away from danger with the same calm certainty it had shown all along. Later, on the ground, someone would clap him on the shoulder and call it luck. Someone else would call it skill. He wouldn't argue with either. He would sit quietly, listening to the ticking of cooling metal, replaying the feeling of speed, of the moment when fear had given way to motion. High above Europe, a rookie had learned something important that day, not about the enemy, not about the war, but about what happened when a pilot stopped trying to survive and simply let a great machine do what it was born to do. And somewhere in the German ranks, there were men who would remember a silver aircraft they could not catch, and the brief, unsettling realization that sometimes, even with 9 against 1, the sky chose otherwise. The flight home felt longer than it should have, stretched thin by adrenaline slowly draining from his veins. The Mustang no longer roared with urgency. It settled into a steady, confident hum, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. The rookie kept his eyes moving, scanning the sky out of habit now rather than fear. Every cloud looked suspicious for a moment, every glint of light demanded a second glance, but the air stayed empty. The war, at least for him, had gone quiet again. Below, the countryside slid past in wide, gentle motions. Farmhouses appeared and disappeared. Roads curved lazily through fields scarred only faintly by bomb craters. From up here, it was impossible to tell which places were occupied, which were waiting to be liberated, which had already paid their price. He wondered briefly about the people on the ground, whether they ever looked up, whether they could hear the distant echo of engines and know how close death had just passed overhead. He adjusted his course and checked his instruments again, slower this time, more deliberately. Oil pressure steady, temperatures normal, the Merlin engine hadn't even complained. That fact stayed with him, lingering in his thoughts. 9 fighters diving hard, guns blazing. And the airplane had simply run away. The radio remained mostly silent, broken only by routine calls from other pilots scattered across the sky. Voices calm and professional, as if nothing remarkable ever happened at 30,000 feet. He listened without speaking, content to let the sound remind him that he wasn't alone anymore. As the minutes passed, the tension in his shoulders eased. His grip on the stick relaxed. The fear that had sharpened everything into painful clarity faded into something softer, more reflective. He replayed the first moment again, the instant he had seen the FW-190s appear, the sick drop in his stomach, the certainty that he had made a terrible mistake by being where he was. He thought about how close he had come to turning, to trying something clever, something aggressive, something that would have felt brave but likely ended differently. Instead, he had trusted speed. On the ground, back at base, the landing was uneventful. The Mustang kissed the runway with a light bounce, tires screeching briefly before settling. As he taxied in, the aircraft felt suddenly heavy, like an animal that had finished running and was now content to walk. Ground crew waved him forward, unaware that the same machine rolling past them had just outrun death. When the engine finally shut down, silence rushed in, loud and complete. The ticking of cooling metal filled the space around him. He stayed in the cockpit for a few seconds longer than necessary, hands resting on the controls, eyes fixed straight ahead. Only now did his hands begin to tremble, just slightly. Climbing down, he was met with casual curiosity more than excitement. Someone asked how the flight went. Someone else made a joke about the cold. He answered simply, vaguely, as pilots often did. Saw some action, nothing more. In the briefing room later, the story came out in fragments. A sighting, a pursuit, an escape. The intelligence officer raised an eyebrow when he mentioned the number. 9 FW-190s. The room grew quieter for a moment. Someone whistled softly. Someone else shook their head. "How'd you get away?" a pilot asked, leaning back in his chair. The rookie thought about it, really thought about it, and realized how little there was to explain. "I didn't fight them," he said. "I just didn't slow down." That answer lingered in the room, settling into the minds of men who understood exactly what it meant. Word traveled, as it always did. Not officially, not in reports or citations, but through conversations over coffee, through comments made while cleaning guns or strapping into cockpits. The story grew in the telling, but the core remained the same. A single Mustang, a rookie pilot, and 9 German fighters that couldn't close the distance. Across the lines, the story traveled too. In a Luftwaffe unit miles away, pilots gathered after landing, helmets under their arms, faces tired and thoughtful. The chase was discussed quietly, without excuses. The American hadn't turned. He hadn't tried to outfly them in circles. He had simply gone faster than expected, faster than seemed reasonable, faster than their assumptions allowed. Someone mentioned the Mustang's range. Someone else cursed its engine. Another pilot stared at the floor, replaying the sight of the silver aircraft shrinking ahead of him, a feeling he didn't like and couldn't easily dismiss. The war moved on, as wars always do. New missions replaced old ones. Losses mounted. Victories blurred together. But that chase stayed fixed in memory, a small but unsettling reminder that the balance in the air was shifting, not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily. For the rookie, something changed too. The next time enemy aircraft appeared, the fear was still there, but it no longer paralyzed him. He had felt the edge of his own limits and the limits of his machine, and neither had failed him. He learned to think in terms of energy and patience, to choose when not to fight, to understand that survival itself could be a kind of victory. Sometimes, late at night, he would lie in his bunk listening to the distant rumble of engines returning from missions. He would close his eyes and remember the feeling of the Mustang at full speed, the way the air seemed to part for it, the way the world narrowed to a single direction, forward. He never heard the German radio call. He never knew the exact words spoken as the chase ended, but in some quiet, unspoken way, he understood them. He understood that moment when confidence cracked, when experience met something new and couldn't quite overcome it. High above a continent at war, a lesson had been written not in ink, but in distance, a lesson about speed, restraint, and the rare clarity that comes when instinct and machine move as one, leaving nothing behind but empty sky and unanswered questions. The days that followed blurred together in the way combat days always did, stitched from briefings, flights, meals eaten too fast, and sleep that never felt deep enough. The rookie settled into a rhythm that felt both comforting and dangerous. Comforting because routine dulled the sharp edge of fear. Dangerous because routine made extraordinary things start to feel normal. Each morning, he walked past rows of Mustangs parked on the grass, their noses pointed into the wind like they were eager to be released. The ground crews treated them with a quiet reverence, wiping oil stains, checking panels, tapping metal as if listening for secrets. He watched them sometimes, thinking about how many hands, how many hours, had gone into building a machine capable of outrunning 9 enemy fighters. It made the war feel vast and impersonal, yet strangely intimate at the same time. In the air, the sky seemed bigger now, not emptier. There were always contrails, always distant shapes, but bigger in the sense that he understood it better. Altitude was no longer just a number. Speed was no longer just a gauge. They were tools, currencies to be spent carefully or hoarded when possible. He began to sense the flow of a fight before it fully formed, the subtle shifts that told him when to stay and when to leave. Still, there were moments when the memory returned without warning. Sometimes it was the sound of the engine pushing hard, climbing through thin air. Sometimes it was the way sunlight flashed off a wing at just the wrong angle. In those moments he felt again the weightless certainty of that dive, the way fear had sharpened into something almost peaceful. He never spoke about it unless asked. Some things felt smaller when left unexamined. One afternoon, after a long escort mission, he found himself walking alongside an older pilot, a man with creases permanently set around his eyes and a way of moving that suggested he had learned to conserve energy. They walked in silence for a while, boots crunching softly on gravel. "I heard about that run you made," the older pilot said eventually, not looking over. The rookie shrugged, just kept the throttle forward. The older pilot smiled faintly. "That's usually the right answer." They stopped near the edge of the field and watched a Mustang lift off, wheels tucking away as it climbed. The engine's note rose and then steadied, strong and confident. "You know," the older pilot continued, "there was a time when we'd have killed to have something like that. A plane that lets you decide when the fight happens." The rookie nodded. He thought about the German pilots he had outrun, about how skilled they must have been to stay alive this long, about the frustration they must have felt watching him disappear into the distance. The war didn't slow down to acknowledge these thoughts. Missions grew longer. The skies grew more crowded. The enemy adapted as enemies always do. There were new tactics, new threats, moments when speed alone wasn't enough and decisions had to be made in heartbeats. On one mission, clouds closed in unexpectedly, swallowing formations whole. The world turned gray and disorienting, the horizon vanishing. He flew by instruments, calm on the surface, alert beneath it. Somewhere in that gray, he thought about how fragile everything really was. A single mistake, a moment of hesitation, a wrong assumption. When the clouds finally broke, the sky opened like a promise. Sunlight poured through gaps, illuminating wings and fuselages in gold. He felt a quiet gratitude then, not triumphant, just thankful. Letters from home arrived sporadically, folded and unfolded until the creases softened. They spoke of ordinary things, weather, neighbors, small changes that seemed impossibly distant. He read them slowly, imagining a world where speed was measured in miles per hour on empty roads. not knots at altitude under fire. He never mentioned the chase. He didn't know how to explain it without making it sound larger than it was, or smaller. How do you describe the moment when survival comes down to trusting momentum, when 9 enemies dissolve into background noise because the only thing that matters is the line you're flying? As months passed, the rookie stopped feeling like a rookie. Not because he had lost his caution, but because he had learned where to place it. He learned to respect the aircraft without worshipping it, to rely on it without assuming it would save him every time. He learned that even the fastest machine had limits, and that knowing where those limits were mattered more than bravado. Occasionally, during quiet patrols, he imagined the German pilots again. He wondered if they were still flying, if they had told the story themselves, perhaps with a laugh that carried a bitter edge. He wondered if they, too, had learned something that day about assumptions, about underestimating an opponent, about the changing nature of the war. The sky didn't care about sides. It offered the same thin air to everyone, the same unforgiving laws. Speed wasn't American or German. It simply was. One evening, after a particularly long day, he stood alone near the runway as the sun dipped low. The horizon burned orange and red, the light catching on metal and glass. A Mustang rolled past, engine idling, its silhouette dark against the fading sky. He listened to the sound until it faded, until there was only wind moving through grass. Somewhere, far away and long ago now, a radio call had ended a chase with a few clipped words. The rookie would never hear them, but their echo lived on in the space he carried with him. A quiet understanding that sometimes survival wasn't about outgunning or outthinking an enemy, but about recognizing the moment when the best choice was simply to go faster than fear, faster than doubt, faster than the past could follow, and the sky, vast and indifferent, remained open ahead of him, waiting.